to show you, this is one of the clients that I worked with. He gave me permission to share both his story and his experience. He was a Wiccan witch high priest in the northern Colorado area who, after spending several months with me, he converted to Christianity, and this was his baptism. Where at his baptism, at the top one you can see he's burning his spell books. So he's burning his spell books, people were praying for him, and then he got baptized on October 31st, which is Halloween. He wanted to change the meaning of his former holy day, and so the one drawback is the river is extremely cold in Colorado in the end of October. So this is a baptism I really remember. We were freezing cold. But that's just an awesome experience and an awesome testimony. And so, referred to as witches, Wiccans, or Pagans, they like to go by different labels, depending on who you're dealing with. And I'll start here with this is an open letter to Christians, written to me by this woman who calls herself Mystica. And she wrote me this letter addressed to Christians and her perspective of what she would want to see from Christians. And this is from Mystica. I don't care which religious community you align yourself with. I want to know how spiritual you are as a person in the daily activities of life. I don't care how many fundamental beliefs you cherish in your head. I want to know what your heart cherishes, for that is what your hands will ultimately do. Show me what you do with your time and how you spend your money, and I will know what your real beliefs are. I don't care what doctrinal knowledge you possess or how many times you've proved your position. I want to know how many times you've proved God exists by being his helping hand to the lonely, the sick, the poor, and the unheard voices. I don't care if your church building has fancy stained glass windows, cushions on the pews, or beautifully landscaped gardens. I want to know about the people inside. Do they act differently when inside those four walls than when outside? Do they use different words, put on different mannerisms, or even dress differently? Do they even have friends outside those walls? I don't care if you pay tithes and give offerings or how much you donate to charities or other organizations. I want to know how the other 90% of your income is spent. Your generosity in all of life speaks more to me of who you are and what kind of God you serve. I don't care where you are on the ladder or what your title is. I want to know how much family time was sacrificed to get there and what you will sacrifice to stay there. Show me how much family time and personal time you spend with God, and I will have a clearer picture of where you are spiritually. I don't care which food you choose to eat or drinks you choose to drink. I want to know how often you share that food and drink with others. If you practice hospitality, whether your table is groaning with gourmet delicacies or simply bread and water, that tells me more about your inner health than any diet. I don't care what special days, seasons, or festivals you observe. I want to know how you live sunset to sunset every day of the year. Your daily pace, rituals, and observations reveal more to me about your beliefs than specific days. I don't care which books or magazines you read, conferences or seminars you attend, or even how much Bible study you do. I want to know how all that information is making a difference in your ability to live in such a way that I might actually be attracted to that story enough to call it my own. I found that particular letter very powerful and convicting. And really, that letter pretty much sums up the entire presentation. So if the only thing you take away is that's great. Because that is what will appeal to the witches. They want to see, can you offer a compelling enough story that they want to call it their own in your life and actions. Basically, the way this will be organized is I'll talk a little bit about the basic beliefs and practices so you can get a general overview. I will have peppered in there personal testimonies and stories from people I've worked with. And then the second half will be entirely strategies on how to witness effectively and how to avoid certain landmines so everything doesn't blow up in your face, which is pretty easy to do in this particular kind of witnessing context. The overarching term for everything is paganism. Often they like to be called witches or pagans. If they go by Wiccan, that's a subset or like a denomination of paganism. It's not simply a religion, but it's a large number of religions with similar philosophies. It describes a variety of practices that draw elements from various historical pagan religions, use ritual and myth. They have certain seasonally based holy days. They usually revere nature as sacred, and are polytheistic, pantheistic, or duotheistic. And we'll talk about that. It's also one of the fastest growing religions among the teen and preteen set. This is an actual picture. There's a lot of kids' books operated that are geared now to teach paganism to children, to your little witches. And is this the fault of Harry Potter? No. A lot of witches, when you talk to them about Harry Potter, actually do not like Harry Potter because it does not have the pagan worldview. It has magic, but there's nothing about the pagan worldview in there, which a lot of the witches find very disappointing or misleading those away from paganism who might be interested in magic. So not the fault of Harry Potter. A lot of witches will share a certain myth about how they began. The myth pretty much goes like this. Before recorded history, the entire world practiced white witchcraft. The entire world was a matriarchy. It was ruled by women, and the entire world was at peace and in harmony with nature, being ruled by these women with white magic. Then there began to be a shift. Males wanted to come into power. And so once males began to dominate, strife began. That's when war began. And this denomination and strife, as males attempting to take over, became focused in traditional monotheism, especially Christianity. And then Christianity felt threatened by pagans, and so Christianity attempted a pagan genocide around the time of the Inquisition. A lot of witches will say, remember the burning times. The myth has that during this time, over 9 million witches were burned at the stake by Christians. And so the rallying cry, remember the burning times, is to not forget that. Which, knowing about this, helps you realize when you're trying to share Christ with a witch, that could very well be asking something similar to asking a Jew to get all lovey with Hitler. And it can be a very difficult process. And so once Christianity started this genocide against witches, the pagans went underground into hidden practices. And today's practitioners are recovering this old nature religion, bringing it back, reclaiming their heritage, and seeking a return of this worldwide, peaceful, earth-oriented life. I do say this is more of a myth. A lot of pagan authors are realizing the burning times there's not much truth to that. The Inquisition was actually Christian on Christian violence. They were burning Christians that didn't have the appropriate Christian beliefs. One of the more famous pagan authors, Margot Adler, says probably the witches that actually died were around 60,000. Some pagan authors have even said as much as, we don't think there was a single witch that was actually burned for actual witchcraft. But other authors say it doesn't matter if it wasn't real. What matters is the meaning the story gives us. And a lot of people do think it's real. The genuine history of how modern day witchcraft started, it was developed primarily by that guy, Gerald Gardner, in the 1950s in England, as his own invention, mixing various occult practices from ancient and modern sources. Which is interesting. This whole idea of a very female-friendly, female-ruled religion was developed by a man, Gerald Gardner. It was then further developed by others, eventually brought over to the US, and then in the 70s it just exploded into all kinds of different practices, with people creating their own varied expressions, and the general rule is be innovative. Borrow from the best, so you search any ancient histories you want, find what practices you like, and salad bar it into your own particular practice. That's a list of, they call them traditions. Oh, did this, Hannah, where'd Hannah go?
Yeah.
We lost the spacing on the slide. And so that's a list of, I'm not even going to go through them right now, but that is a list, thank you, of the various, of just a small fraction of the different denominations you'll find in witchcraft. You notice the last one down there says Christian Wicca, Christian witchcraft. Yes, that exists. There's two forms of it. One is either like the story of the Bible of Simon the Sorcerer, where they see the Holy Spirit in prayer as another source of using magic, and just graft that into their practice. Others actually have Christian beliefs in Jesus, the Trinity, God, but they incorporate occult magic into their Christian life. Problems? Yes, but you find that out there. A quote, if you ask 3 witches to describe their beliefs, you'll probably get about 4 answers. And so know this in going into the situation, that every witch could potentially be very unique. And if you talk to one and get a general view of what their beliefs are, it may not apply to anyone else. They do have a general doctrine. They're anti-dogmatic. They always like to say, we're a religion of do's, we don't have laws, we don't have rules, but we're about just doing, practicing. It's also very eclectic. You can customize your religion from various sources and viewpoints. You'll often hear the term traditions and paths. A tradition is what you practice, and then path is how you make that specific to you. It'd be like your denomination versus your own spiritual walk. A quote from this woman who calls herself Silver Wings: I have studied many traditions along my path, but my path is my own and is unique to me, just as yours is unique to you. I would not worry about trying to put a label on yourself. Do whatever you need to do to find yourself in your personal path to the divine. And don't worry how to explain yourself to others. That's why you borrow from anyone you want. This, however, is not without controversy. I know one Wiccan author that just takes witches to task over this. He's like, okay, this is his quote: I hate it when pagan authors take a popular religion, remove all the parts that don't conform to their worldview, then publish it as a new magical system. The ironic thing is that witches have been accusing Christians of absorbing their religion in the past, taking pagan holidays and making them Christian, and they get mad at that, and then they turn around and do the same thing. I learned in my freshman German class how the Christmas tree was a 19th century pagan tradition. And how is that borrowing any different from contemporary pagan borrowing of any and all religions that catch our fancy and giving it a witch makeover? Some witches have even accused other witches that that's blatantly racist, thinking you just take some from Thailand, take some from Hawaii, make it your own, and not respect the native religion. That could be a point of interest and discussion with witches you interact with. It's a religion of female empowerment. A lot of the myths and stories are all about women having leadership roles, having power, valuing themselves, valuing their bodies, and lots of rituals focused around healing for women. It's also paganism is a reaction against consumer culture. Anything corporate is pretty much rejected. They don't want anything to do with consumer culture. They want to be their own unique people, which I think is a very valuable thing. And it's also it provides belonging for the outcast. A quote from a pagan named Gossamer: if I have technicolor hair, enjoy body piercing and tattoos, or make my own clothes that look rather odd to others, pagans will welcome me. But imagine the funny looks I would get walking into a Christian church. A lot of people gravitate to paganism and witchcraft because it provides that belonging for someone that just doesn't fit anywhere else. And so what can Christians do? Well, there's a lot of things that Christians can resonate with. One, anti-dogmatic. Christians focus more. Why aren't we focused more on the do's and the don'ts? Christ was very female empowering. Like, okay, no divorce, that protects women. No incest. No female slavery. It can be very female empowering if the church is willing to embrace that part. Romans 8 talks about only Christ can redeem nature. Christianity can be environmentally focused. Ideally, we're against consumer culture. A lot of witches will see Christianity as its own consumer culture. They consume the evangelical things. What would evangelicals buy? All the churches look like cookie-cutter corporate offices, and so it can be rather distasteful to them. But Christianity at its core is a rejection of popular culture that people are involved in. And ideally, we should be providing belonging for the outcast. More doctrine animism, the idea that everything has a life force, and so that everything is divine or has the divine in it. What follows from this is that everything is to be revered as sacred, witchcraft is life-affirming, and then, therefore, humans are divine. Polytheism is also pretty much a general rule. The idea is that there's multiple layers to reality, and you worship diverse gods. Pretty much gods of your pick. There's 3 approaches to this. Some people see that as there's one God, but this God, she has manifested herself in various ways. Whether as Artemis, Thor, these are all manifestations of one divine source. Other Wiccans will see these gods, there's no real gods. They're just symbols, Jungian archetypes, that help provide meaning to your life. Others will say, these are all real gods, they're their own individual people, and you find who to worship. One interesting thing is on one of the Wiccan websites, I started a poll. I said, so if I would choose to worship Gandalf or Gandalf's cat as my god, could I do this? The responses were really unique. I got 62 responses. 40 of them said absolutely not. That is offensive. Either because there's a limited number of gods, you're making your own god up. You can't do that. Other people said these gods are a manifestation of the one source. God has chosen to manifest herself in only those ways. Picking something out of what's already been revealed is silly. But the other, so 40 said no way. The rest said great. Do whatever is meaningful to you. These are probably the people that saw gods as more symbols. It says, if Gandalf is real to you, that's good enough, go with it. They also believe in higher and lower life forms, extra-dimensional entities such as astral beings, elementals, aliens, angels, demons, spirit guides. There's a lot to reality. Tolerance tends to be a general rule. Diversity of belief is healthy. This is a quote that pretty much sums it up. You state both religions, Wicca and Christianity, can't be true. Is it not possible that one God who created everything created multiple religions because he or she knew that not everyone would agree on one set framework and so gave you a choice? And this is a common argument for it that I've seen. In nature there is diversity, and diversity is healthy. There is the greatest richness of life where there is not conformity, where you have more different kinds of trees, so to speak. Such as planting of one crop can be wiped out by a weevil, or one fire, or one fungus. When you have multiple crops, that's life-giving. One crop ultimately brings death. And so diversity is healthy. The best response I found to that is just to say the word cane toad. For those of you that don't know that story, that's in Australia. They introduced the cane toad into the ecosystem, and this cane toad is pretty much wiped out native life forms, and it's incredibly harmful, and the Australians wish they could just wipe them out and get it away. So that particular illustration is there's healthy diversity, and there is unhealthy diversity. Well, what's the healthy diversity that God has? Races. Different men, women, tribes, tongues, but not, you need to worship different gods. Worshipping your different gods would be the cane toad. Intolerance is a form of religious imperialism, and conversion can be seen as a hate crime. You try to share Jesus with many witches, they will think you are perpetrating a hate crime on them. And there is great anger toward those who claim to be the only way. One big mistake that Christians often make will accuse witches of being Satan worship. That is a big mistake, and you'll step on a landmine. It's not Satan worship. Most witches do not even believe in Satan. Just as they don't believe Jesus exists, they don't believe Satan exists. Technically, you could say, well, if you're worshiping demonic entities or spirits, that is Satan worship. That's the logical conclusion, but they won't really accept that. If you see, there's a difference. A lot of times you'll see the witch's pentacle. That's their symbol. It looks like the Satan star, but the Satan star has the main point pointing down. The witch's star has the main point pointing up. That's the way they try to set themselves apart from Satan worshipers. They turn the star around to say we are not Satan worshipers. And the points tend to reveal the different aspects of magic, the different elements in the world: air, earth, fire, water, spirit. That's what it stands for. Or it can stand for the parts of the body: head, arms, legs. Ethics, well, for Wiccans at least, they have two laws. If it doesn't harm anyone, do what you will. And the threefold law: whatever you do will come back to you 3 times. So if you put good out to the world, then it comes back to you 3 times. If you put bad out in the world, it'll come back to you 3 times. But at the same time, they say that there are no absolutes in the world. Most Christian books that I read about witches, that deal with witches, say you can argue this point with them. Argue the illogic, the inconsistency. How can you say there are no absolutes and say these two are absolutes? The best I've seen that argument ever do is if the witch realizes your point, say, you know, you're right. So therefore, I'm going to jettison my 2 rules and do anything I want. Which actually takes the witch from, at a surface level, into a much more harmful practice. Oops. It's like, oh, so now I'll just do bad and good. It doesn't matter because it's not going to come back to me. So not the strategy I recommend. Ethics. A lot of Christians just want to experience a spiritual reality. They don't want just an intellectual faith. They want a spirituality that's integrated into all life. And they want to participate and have a voice. Here's a quote. Witchcraft is not a religion where you can go and have someone perform the service for you. It's kind of an accusation. That's your church. All witches are priests and priestesses in their own right, and we perform all our own rituals ourselves. There are no intermediaries between us and the gods. We are tired of being preached at. We want to be participants. So if you're going to appeal to a witch, you need to have a church that does that. They don't just want to sit in pews and listen. They want to be a part of things. Witchcraft also has lots of rites of passage to celebrate different stages of life. To celebrate, say, if you have a miscarriage, there's a ritual for dealing with the pain. Rituals for all these different things in life. This is also an appeal of witchcraft, is it tends to deal with the day-to-day realities. My first encounter with a witch was in PE class in high school. I was playing tennis with him, with the witch, and none of his serves were going over the net. He was a lousy tennis player. And he got so mad, he threw his racket and went out and started doing this spell in the middle of the field to help improve his tennis serve. And of course, this was a PE class, so the PE teacher's like, what are you doing? And that was kind of weird to me at this point. But it says, Wicca says that in witchcraft, hey, my religion can help me make a difference in my tennis serve. Can Jesus help me improve my tennis serve? I'd say that there's a lot more important things than that. But it points to what they desire is something that makes a difference day to day. In all the little things. Not this big afterlife issue, which is very important. They want to know every hour of every day that their spells usually address. Can Christianity do that? Prayer can be an answer, but then you'll have to explain what's the difference between prayer and magic. And which ones tell me, you talk about prayer, but how's your prayer different than what I'm doing? Also, this rituals provide structure and control, helps people feel at home. For people that have no structure or control. That's what comes down to appealing to the outcasts, and provide someone with no structure. And hey, Christianity, we can provide rituals. We can provide an experience of Christianity that's real, spiritually day to day, if we're willing to do that. And here we get down to magic. You see it's spelled with a K. Witches will describe it that way to set it apart from sleight of hand tricks. MAGIC is the people who perform in Vegas. with the K, that's the other kind. It's about manipulating forces in nature to produce change, bringing change into your life and the lives of others. And here's when you approach witches. We have the scientific worldview. A lot of people say magic doesn't exist. That doesn't matter. Put that aside. The witch you're talking to believes it exists. Operate from that basis. If you try to argue magic doesn't exist, that is a failure. Quote, to say we believe in magic is not strong enough a statement. Belief implies a margin of error, a measure of doubt. We know magic works. If you're a practicing witch for any length of time, you have seen magic work enough times to realize how well it can work. Although sometimes it works in ways different than your expectations. So go into it knowing that that's going to be going on. Spiritism is very common. It's where they have contact with what they see as angels, demons, the departed, extra-dimensional entities, spirit guides. Also, possession. This is often called drawing down the moon. It's like drawing something that's out there into yourself. Many witches will invite this, seek it out. Other witches say, and avoid it. So it depends on who you're dealing with. I had a dialogue with a guy I'll call Bruce at my old job. He said he had a spirit guide. But he said he also reads the Bible all the time. Sure, I read the Bible all the time. It's a great spiritual book. I have a wonderful spirit guide who helps me. She calls herself Eunice. When I read the Bible, she tells me what verses to reject or accept and tells me what different things mean. I asked him, so what does she tell you to accept? All that wonderful stuff about living well. Proverbs is great. What does she tell you to reject? All that rubbish about Jesus being anything more than a wise teacher. Interesting. There's also divination, a lot of divination, fortune telling, crystal gazing. It's all part of the practice. Here's an interesting quote when asked someone to describe what do these spiritual entities look like. He called them astral wildlife. Astral wildlife can manifest in a variety of ways and forms. A regular favorite I see is the form of an ugly grinning monkey. A gargoyle and harpy forms are quite common. Some of them prefer a more traditional horned demon look, while others go for a more contemporary appearance. The size and appearance of an entity gives no indication of its actual strength and intelligence. Many small and weak entities seem to delight in looking big and dangerous. This is much like how an animal will fluff up its fur to make it seem bigger during a confrontation. Many entities I see choose forms taken from your own mind, which indicates some degree of telepathic ability. This gives an insight of what people are dealing with and what their practices are. They call them astral wildlife when they meditate and try to contact these things. Also part of the practice is altered states of consciousness. This can be achieved in many ways, trances, drugs. A popular witchcraft magazine did a poll of how many people use drugs, and about 50% of the people said they do. So it's about an equal half. So you can imagine when you're dealing with witches, about half of them have some kind of drug use, and they say this helps them in magic. The ones that don't use drugs argue with those who do, saying, what in the world are you thinking? You need to be as clear-headed as you can be when you do magic, or you're going to harm yourself. So what are you doing using drugs? Others like the drugs for the altered state of consciousness. Use sex. Some people use pain. These views differ from group to group. Some people think it facilitates the magic, gives you new experiences of reality. Also, there's a thing called the Great Rite. This is a Wiccan ritual during a holiday that falls around May 1st, and it's a celebration of fertility, and oftentimes this can mean large amounts of group sex with the people who all go to practice it. Some people don't think it's safe, and they just use simulated acts by using swords and cups. It differs from group to group. This is also why Wiccan can be attractive to a lot of outcast teen males. They go there for the sexual activity. This is looked down upon by other Wiccans, but it happens. And so you can expect among witches there can be a large variety of views on sexuality. That's one of the festivals, and an appropriate enough picture of one. I found one, no nudity. And so they like to party. And so witnessing. When you're going to share Christ to someone who comes from this worldview or these beliefs, what do you do? It seems like the deck is stacked against you, and it is. The difficulties. Things can blow up in your face. Since just witnessing is a hate crime. And many have been burned by the church. A lot of witches have no set doctrine, so how do you even talk about it? Some Wiccans are comfortable with illogic. Truth is something you feel. It doesn't have to follow logical prepositions. And so if they believe something illogical, that's fine. I don't have to conform to your logic. Every witch can be different. Oftentimes they are touchy and looking for a reason to be offended from a Christian. And they have their history, both real and imagined, of Christian persecution. I even had one client, there's these books called The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley about witches in the Middle Ages and the time of Arthur and Camelot. That was his personal history in witchcraft. And I found myself having to apologize to him about the stuff the Christians did to the witches in that fictional book. Because that was real for him. Where'd they come from? 90% of witches indicated they came from a Christian church. That's a lot. Of those, half came from liberal churches and half came from conservative. Why? If they came from a conservative church, it was because they were burned. Something happened in that church that turned them off. If they came from a liberal church, it's because the liberal church gave them nothing to believe in. You sit around talking about rainbows and happy feelings, but you give me nothing solid. And witchcraft can do that better. So why am I even sticking around? And a lot of them do it for rebellion. You want to rebel against your straight-laced Christian parents? Satanism is too scary. Go for witchcraft. It was 85% that indicated they came from a Christian church. That's a lot. So when you're going to witness, prayer. A lot of it comes down to prayer. Need lots of prayer. Prayer both for yourself in the situation. You don't know what kind of extra spiritual stuff you're dealing with. And prayer that the right opportunities will open. Had one client talk to me on the phone wanting into the drug rehab program. I told him, the program is Christian. Are you okay with this? And he tells me later, everything inside of me said, no way, I'm not okay with this. I want to go anywhere else but there. But somehow the word that came out of my mouth was, no problem, I'm going to show up. And he has no idea why that happened. He's the guy that was in the baptism pictures at the beginning. It was funny. He was like, no way, I don't want to go. But prayer, it means a lot. And then do life together. When it comes to a witch, get to know them individually about their person and their tradition. Questions: why did you become a witch? Why do you like witchcraft? One of the witchcraft magazines did a poll. What's the biggest mistake Christians make with witches? Every single respondent said making assumptions. 100%. That's huge. And so you need to start by asking questions of each individual person. As with Christians and witches, both believe there is something greater worth worshiping. We value nature and community, so that can provide an initial common ground. Here's a quote by this author who converted to Christianity and then wrote a book about witchcraft called Wicca's Charm. And she talks about, there was this guy at work in Greensboro named Ed. He was in a wheelchair and would roll by my cubicle where I worked and would say, Kathy, I'm still praying for you. Well, I would fuss at him and occasionally outright swear at him. Sometimes I told him that he had no right to talk to his God on my behalf. Other times I told him I simply didn't care. That man prayed for me for years, day in and day out, rolling by my cubicle and saying that he's praying for me. I think he is the main reason I'm a Christian today. He never gave up on me. We need to do life together. and he's getting in and participating in things with the person. Another big thing I found, the god or goddess the witch chooses reveals their own personal longings and values. A person named Clarissa, do you like snakes? There's a snake goddess. Or a snake god for you. Or you can decide to simply worship the snake spirit itself. Are you more of a cat person? You might decide to worship the goddess Bastet. But wait a minute, you say. She's a fertility goddess, and I don't want to have kids. Maybe you should go with Durga instead. I did. She rides a tiger, and she's really fierce, carrying all sorts of swords and other weapons. Yeah, she was the perfect goddess for me, I thought. She'll even help protect me against my evil ex-boyfriend. If you just listen to that statement and break it down, you can have a great insight of what are the main things that are important to her, what's valuable in her world, and what is she looking for. Another person named Melanie, the Norse gods, well, they're sensible and know how to have a good time. I always liked Thor because he was sensible and did what was necessary to get things done. And I knew they wouldn't mind the occasional, or even frequent, intoxication on the part of their worshippers. You can also see what's important to Melanie. So the god reveals their values. I think that's a very important question, because then you can start really talking to what's in their heart. Especially with that woman, Clarissa. She was worried about an ex-boyfriend. What happened there? Was that what pushed her to witchcraft in the first place? So much about witchcraft is about searching. You can point to what you've found. Here's a big one. Tell stories. Answer questions by telling stories more than a logical presentation. Because it's important to capture the imagination. Most witches are very curious by nature. And once they figure out that you're not going to be the kind that throws the Bible in their face or tell them they're going to hell, you can really start engaging their curiosity. This one was convicting to me. Are Christian gospel presentations more like spoilers that tell you what happened, but take all the suspense and delight out of the journey? Many Christians have been so intent on getting to the point and bottom-lining things for the sake of saving souls that they've taken the mystery and surprise out of the narrative. We jump right to the end. God loves you, Jesus died for you, pray this prayer. Often we are so concerned about getting people from here to there that they don't experience the journey enough to really make the faith their own. We have completely short-circuited the narrative imagination, and that is such a loss. That tells me that's what the witches are looking for. Give them a story that will capture their imagination. Now, I don't really like the Left Behind books. We actually had 3 witches in my old place of work convert simply because they sat down and read through the Left Behind stories with our maintenance guy. Did they really latch on and believe Left Behind books? No. But they thought it was a really cool story, and it got their imagination going, and it pulled them to Christ. Another quote, pagan gods are so colorful. I always prefer anthropomorphized gods and goddesses. I was afraid of worshiping one god, the source of all, thinking that would mean I was just worshiping a blob of energy or light. I thought God the Father was like that and figured Christianity was boring. No herbs to burn, no candles, no statues, no image of God to meditate upon. How dull. I didn't realize that Jesus Christ was anything but dull. I didn't realize that all the excitement, all the color and glory that I was seeking could be found in His Word and by His blood. I also thought that the Christian God was about rules and regulations, boring stuff, telling you how to live. I didn't realize it was quite the opposite, that He had sent His Son just for our benefit. I did not fathom His infinite mercy and the fact that this was the very revolution I was looking for, a revolution against the world of sin and suffering, individual and corporate. If you can tell it in a way that captures that excitement, you can draw the person's heart. You're going to have to diffuse hostility. Most of the time, you will have hostility, which means being willing to sit, listen, not running away in anger. They swear at you, be like that guy Ed in his wheelchair, and keep rolling by day after day, no matter how many times you get swore at. Oftentimes you have to drain out the anger before they'll even listen. Be willing to take that anger as a healing presence. If you see that you're helping them heal, He can help you deal with that. Also, sometimes it can help at the outset just lay out the issue. It's like, I want to talk about my faith with you. Can we do that? And you talk to me about yours. Know that we might have disagreements, but can we use this as a time to get to know each other? Oftentimes, if you address what the anger could be at the beginning before you wade in, you can save yourself some trouble. Just describe the issue before you have a dialogue. And it shows them that this could be going on, it respects them. What if you only have a short period of time? Point to Jesus. Just talk about Jesus' story, Jesus only. If you only have that short time with the witch. Most of the time, the witch will try to ask you questions. But what about homosexuality? What about the Inquisition? What about your position on women in ministry? Those are usually diversion tactics if you have a short term. And you can find, you start wading into those questions, you will spend a half an hour with this witch having a great intellectual discussion, and you've never talked about Jesus because they derailed you. And you go your separate ways. You've had a good conversation, but nothing that makes the point. Just say, that's great for conversations if we have more time. Let me just talk about Jesus. That's the way to do it. And here, conversion first, conviction second. This is an important thing to remember because usually you try to convict a person of sin first. I need to convince you that you're a rotten sinner, and then you'll see the need for God and embrace Jesus. It doesn't work that way with witches. Usually they have to know they belong first, that you accept them first. And as a question, who convicts of sin? The Holy Spirit. And when you really receive the Holy Spirit? When you accept Christ. And so most of the conviction of sin doesn't happen until after they convert. A quote from the woman who wrote Wicca's Charm, who converted from that guy Ed. Christians used to try to convince me that sleeping around was sinful and that I needed to repent of it. I loved being promiscuous and did not feel sorry for it at all. I just became annoyed at Christians who told me this. Through various life events, I came to know Jesus and accepted him in my life. It was only well after Jesus was in my life that I began to feel that my hookups weren't right. After months of struggling, then I vowed to remain chaste until marriage and have done so. Point to Jesus, and then a lot of times wait for the conviction for the Holy Spirit to work on it. They'll start bringing that up on their own. Will they embrace Jesus before they're convicted of sin? Yes. Another thing, if you have a long period of time with witches, answer their questions. That guy from the beginning slide, it took me 3 months of sitting with him for hours asking questions. As he told me and wrote to me, if you were not willing to spend 3 months with me answering my myriad of questions about Christian beliefs, I would not be a Christian today. I would lie awake at night and think of the hardest questions I could to ask you. But as they were answered, I really began to understand this faith, and my objections to Christianity disappeared. Be willing to say, I don't know. A lot of times I had to, because he would stay awake at night, thinking of the hardest questions he could. I'm going to throw him off and prove this Christianity wrong. I don't know on this one. Let me get back to you, and then I would. Here's one from a guy named Wolf Hunter. I asked a lot of questions because I was unsure about a lot of things in regard to the Bible and Christianity. And most of the time, the Bible study leader could not answer them. I continued to ask them, and he became frustrated. Eventually kicked me out of Bible study group because I was questioning the Word of God. Fortunately, Wolf Hunter's still a witch. It might have been different had the leader been willing to answer his questions. Another person who wrote to me under the name Anonymous, my parents have a strong ethic for going to church every week, but they don't really have a reason why. I asked her if she would have likely embraced Christianity had her parents' religious practices been more heartfelt rather than based on tradition, and if they were willing to answer her questions. After thinking about it in a moment, she said, probably. A lot of those witches who came from Christian churches, a common theme was they asked hard questions that no one could answer, so they went somewhere else. Also in college, the Bible study I co-led, we opened with a half-an-hour question and answer session every Bible study. And after several months, we had 3 witches that started attending regularly. Why? I asked them. It's like, because here I can actually have someone that'll answer my questions without telling me I'm going to hell first. There are some pagan values we can affirm and encourage and say, hey, witchcraft is not an answer to those needs, but a lot of times the church, we have the alternative, but we've never really developed it. We don't provide it. How many churches provide a strong environmental care? Churches provide for helping women feel valued. The church should reclaim the arts, care for the environment, and show it's not just a Sunday morning thing. Reclaim life care and not just soul winning. Soul winning, important. Need the life care too. And also to let witches know you don't have to give up everything when you become Christian. You can still keep potpourri, teas, herb, composting. I talked to one witch that anyone who composted, she thought was a witch. I don't care if this person says they're Christian, if they compost, they're a witch. No. Other people other than witches can do these things, and if you convert, you can still do them. Here's one particular issue with environmentalism. A lot of witches I've talked to believe Christianity is the one and only sole thing to blame for environmental destruction. And the reason being, in their mind, is that Christianity said, Nate, your tree, your bush, your waterfall is no longer a god. It's not divine. And so once you remove the god from the tree or the bush or the landscape, then it becomes no longer sacred and you can exploit it and do whatever you want to it. And that's why they think Christianity is responsible for the environmental problem. You can say that's really the problem of the modern industrial revolution, not Christianity, because God talks about through Psalms and through the Bible, he really cares for every sparrow. But a lot of witches have never heard that message. Questions. Some questions you can bring up. Why should you value the things that witches value if the only moral authority is yourself and there's no ultimate authority to answer to? Another one, do you really want the God to be subject to human flaws? Is your God or goddess only a mirror for yourself? And here's one. Why are third world pagans flocking to Christianity and this North American, European paganism is mostly white and middle class? As a religion, it's pretty much a white religion. It's white, middle class. You can ask that question, why? That is a very good question starter. If you bring it up in a very loving, non-threatening way. Here's another one too. In an earlier slide, there was this bunny when we had to correct the slide from being big to little. A lot of witches will refer to people that go to witchcraft for superficial reasons as fluffy bunnies. These are people that go to witchcraft for the personal power, the magic, the drugs, or the sex. And a lot of these older witches who believe in the environment and the values, anti-consumerism, really look down on these people. It's like, what are you doing? You're corrupting our religion. You're turning it into its own commercial enterprise. But that's how a lot of witches start. They'll dabble in it. They get locked in for the superficial reasons, and some will then grow on to be the more mature and embrace the values. Here's another one. How did ancient pagans really treat women? Was it really this women-led thing of women empowerment, or were women property, which is pretty much how ancient pagans treated women? Addressing pain, this is a big one. A lot of Wiccans, pagans have a lot of pain. And don't defend the indefensible. Apologize a lot, be willing to apologize for others, take ownership of the mistakes, apologize for the Inquisition, apologize for the Crusades, apologize for that Christian church that hurt them in their past. Be willing to say, I'm sorry. That gets you a lot of street cred. Be willing to receive anger, just bleed it off of them. Don't run at scary stories. Love even when it can be hard. Here's some quotes. While the vast majority of witches are overwhelmingly polite and nice people, sometimes they will abruptly, even rudely, mock Christians and mock God. Note, often happens when discussing a stressful subject. Even a nice person will evidence stress. Get a thick skin if you're a Christian. Some of the angriest witches I've ever met are serving the Lord now because someone took the time to meet them, not with what they dished out, but with love and gentleness. If you're able to do this, they may conclude that you're nuts, but they'll grow to love you back and will greatly respect you for it. Sometimes asking a witch to convert to Christianity is asking them to leave the only thing that's proved therapeutic and healing for them. That can be tough. Here's one when they were talking about a women's only witchcraft group. And they just spent a lot of time sharing stories. And as we were there, the stories quietly and tearfully emerged, one by one. Being beaten by a father, abused by an alcoholic husband, raped at knife point in bed, gang raped. These are sad. And how many churches are willing to talk about those things in church? I remember once a group I was with put on a play at a certain denomination's yearly conference that addressed the theme of recovery from sexual abuse. We were asked never to come back again because that subject matter was not appropriate from the stage for the audience. So people go somewhere else when they're hurt. Can Christian churches be willing to talk about those things openly and offer healing? Love even when it can be hard. And a lot of times, if a Christian approach a witch, they will try to throw out the most offensive thing at you possible to make you go away. Be willing to stick around. Magic's risks. I just asked a bunch of witches, what you think are the biggest risks in doing magic? And rate them in order, and by respondents. And this is what they came up with, a big list. First, pride, megalomania. When you think you have got magic down, you can manipulate people and the world around you through magical means, this can give you a really big head. Becoming separate or other. When you start doing magic, other people who in modern American society is really going to sit down and take you seriously. You become separate, you become other. Some talk about unintended consequences. You do a magic spell to remove job stress from your life, and the next day you find you get fired. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I just wanted the stress gone, but yeah, your stress is gone now, and your job's gone too. Unintended consequences. Addiction. If you approach magic, you can become addicted to the feeling of power that magic gives you. You become addicted to some of the mind-altering stuff that happens in magic or that you use to produce magic. Laziness. You stop wanting to do anything on your own. A lot of clients say, why should I work on the farm? I'll just cast spells for you. Become a little lazy, magic becomes a shortcut. Or what they call attracting hostile attention. You're trafficking with spirits. Sometimes you find someone that approaches you really hostile. And so those are the risks. And oftentimes when you talk to a witch, talk to them, have you ever had a bad experience? Have you known others that have? They'll say, oh yeah, my friend who's doing magic, he's gotten a really big prideful head. And you can start talking and addressing that. Especially the hostile attention stuff. Most witches don't want to practice something dangerous. They just want to find affirmation for themselves. So listen for hints of scary stories and offer your own interpretation of what that scary story is from a Christian point of view. Here's what was interesting. I found some websites out there devoted to witches who are having problems with possession. And they're asking for help from other witches. So a couple questions, a couple quotes on this, just to know and bring it out. Try talking to a Christian about magic. This is from a pagan priestess. You'll get an earful of hell, if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, you get a person who's too scared to ever talk to you about anything ever again. The same person, I do experience side effects from magic, depending on the type of magic I'm using. Most of the time it's simple things, like I can't eat for an hour. Or when I don't ground properly, my hair starts falling out in huge clumps. Sorry, Jill. But those are problems that can happen. And then they start getting worse. This is one person that wrote on one of those websites, wanting help. I'm really in need of help here. I feel a dozen or so entities inside my body. They're intelligent. They They communicated to me a dozen times telepathically, and from the things they've said, screaming threats and curses at me, I gather they are what you would call demons. I can feel parts of it move and squirm inside. It really hurts. There's one that's intelligent. When I started cursing it back, it responded with a strong bump to the stomach from the inside, like it punched me. A few months ago, I started seeing shadow people, 5 or 6 of them actually, dancing in a circle around my bed at night in the early morning. I could hear them screaming in my mind, "Now you're ours, now you're ours." Can someone please help me? One of my clients told me, and I haven't verified this particular story, but he said that he once, it was an issue that I think it was real because it really affected him emotionally. He said he taught an ex-girlfriend of his, a former girlfriend, a certain magical ritual that he thought was pretty complex about that communicated with the spirits. And then he went on vacation. He came back and found her in her apartment dead. Her arms and legs had bent outward so far they snapped at the elbows backward. And she was dead in her apartment. And that was something that he carried guilt for because he felt that he caused that to happen to her because he taught her something that she wasn't capable of handling. This woman who calls herself Firestarter, who converted to Christianity, I told the goddess that I was planning to convert to Christianity. I was attacked, and I still bear the physical scars on my body. Another one, this was a post on the website for help. I have endured demonic oppression and severe psychic attack for 8 years now. It is tiring, and I won't lie when I say there are days I want to give up and just end it all. I don't know of any one instant cure-all, otherwise I would be free by now. But I'm doing all the right stuff you guys are telling me, to take salt bath and sleep with grounding stones. And those tended to be what they were offering on the website for solutions. And then what gets me kind of choked up in this last one is on this website there was an online memorial for all those who were seeking help and never found it, and who passed. This one goes out to them, those who were never able to get help or realize what was happening to them. All the ones who had to spend their lives seeing shadowy figures, spiders made out of black smoke that no one else could see, hearing the screaming voices of mad clowns out of hell that no one else could hear, seeing heads and bodies impaled on 100 invisible tentacles, home to 100 invisible nightmares. My heart goes out to you. You are remembered. There's a lot of people who've had these experiences that need to know some kind of help. And that is a real good way to offer Christ. Because one common themes in these stories, they talk about if they go to Christian churches, they find temporary relief. It comes back when they leave. But just tell them there's some extra steps you can know that can provide that permanently. You can share how the Holy Spirit can protect from spiritual forces, solve possessions, point to the Creator, and point to the power the Creator has over creation. These spiritual forces that they have trouble with can be commanded and leave them alone. The guy who was baptized, he came to me with 6 mental illnesses, including diagnosed sociopath. He liked to tie razor blades in his hair, which was very long at the time, go to mosh pits, and fling his hair around and cut other people. He also really liked to light a lighter and put it to his arm, and he said that watching his skin burn gave him the same pleasure as sex. That's scary stuff. That was actually one of the first things he threw out at me to try to get me offended and make me run away. But we worked with him, and then when he converted, all 6 mental illnesses, including the sociopath, went away. And we had that verified by the state licensed psychiatrist. And he now likes to joke, I have a certificate that says I'm legally sane from the state. Do you? No, I don't. He found liberation. Are all their issues, mental issues, always spiritually based? No. But you won't know that until you wade into it. Another thing that I found helps, use the threefold law. And it says, if whatever you put out comes back to you. And usually this only works if you're dealing with witches whose lives stink and they think it stinks and they want to change. You say, okay, you've been putting out this good, it's supposed to come back to you 3 times. What's your law been doing for you? And usually they sit back and go, oh my. That's usually the reaction I get. But it's not useful with everyone. If you tell that to a witch who's perfectly happy, you're going to get nowhere. Oh, by the way, while I remember, Berkeley is considered one of the witch capitals of the United States. One of their main authors actually lives here, Starhawk. Her magic that she likes to do are big group magic, drumming circles, to try to bring corporate change to large-scale, wide issues in the corporate realm of the United States. They'll organize big drumming circles in San Francisco and stuff. So it's big here in Berkeley, even if you haven't known anyone. Earl, you've gone to a neo-pagan fest here in town. Vocabulary, you don't use the term Christian, use the term follower of Christ. You'll avoid a lot of hostility. They'll be curious, what does follower of Christ mean? You say Christian, they get angry. We've gone a little over, someone has to leave, go ahead. Many do not like Christians, but they rarely have bad things to say about Jesus. Focus on the do's. People know what Christianity is against. Talk about what Christianity is for. Here's one about the church, baptism. If you have a witch who wants to convert, this is what was kind of tripping me up. One of my witches who converted to Christianity was saying, I have to go back to my old coven on Halloween and do this departure ritual. No, you don't. They'll try to convince you to stay. It's like, but I have to say goodbye to all the old spirits I used to worship. Or they have license to plague me forever. And my soul will rot away within me, was the terms he used. And I was like, don't do that. I'm not giving you a pass from the program to go do that. But Amy actually came up, through prayer, came up with this idea for me. He's like, why don't you talk about baptism with him? Not only as a goodbye ritual, but as a hello ritual. And once it was both goodbye and hello, it trumped the old ritual and it was better. And he was really excited about it. But he did not want to have anything to do with a baptismal tub in the front of a church. That was completely corporate, and most witches will find that distasteful. It had to be outside in running water. Okay, so if a witch wants to get baptized, go to some park somewhere. And a lot of times for a witch, rivers, running water are the spiritual communication pathways. So when you get baptized in running water, you're basically telling every other spirit that you've ever had dealings with to go take a hike and you're now Christian. Yeah, make an effort to accommodate the baptism that would be meaningful for them. Here's a quote from this guy, G.K. Chesterton. He's probably my second favorite author after C.S. Lewis. He's actually funnier than C.S. Lewis. So if you see his books, get them. If we continue to revive pagan ideals, we will end as paganism ended in the past. Not in destruction, but in Christianity. It's true. We don't have to worry about paganism. We don't have to be afraid of it. The last paganism ended in Christianity for reasons. Today's paganism will too. Some helpful books to conclude. Drawing Down the Moon by Margot Adler. That's the most well-known famous book by a witch for witches. And it tends to be the most straightforward, just this is what we're about. Wicca's Charm by Catherine Edward Sanders. This is a convert that talks about why is witchcraft so appealing to these people and how do you reach them. Celtic Christianity. I find that one helpful because it talks about how do you reach people. This talks about how the ancient pagans were reached through Christianity, and the same applies to today. Practicing the Presence by Brother Lawrence. There's a copy of it around that table in that room over there. That just talks about how you can develop a Christianity that is meaningful minute by minute, hour by hour in your daily life. Kind of answer that question, how can Jesus improve my tennis serve? Well, he may not address your tennis serve per se, but you can develop the presence of God so much in your day-to-day living that those same daily concerns are addressed. Or a website, xwitch.org. Those are former witches that talk about why they've left and how to reach out to those that are there. There's some helpful stuff. And now we just open it up, questions. This was kind of a shotgun approach, a lot of information. Here's a massive download. Any questions?
Is there a difference between a witch and a wizard?
Usually male It depends on what term that person wants to give to themselves. Usually both men and women will give themselves the term witch. It's usually it's only the men that go to witchcraft, for the fluffy bunny men, who will adopt the term wizard. Usually older ones that will just say, just call yourself a witch. That would be the difference.
So what do you think? What do you think about spiritual gifts and compare that to the like healing compared to the magic, the cake?
That's often a question that will come up.
Mm-hmm.
Say,
Can you repeat the question?
what is the difference between spiritual gifts and magic? One, no spiritual gift is you. It's not I'm the big cheese and I'm doing this. That's an important distinction. That all power comes from God alone, all glory goes to God, and God is still God. There are times he can say no. Paul and Jesus healed some people, not others. Paul never got his own healing happen. Sometimes it takes a while. And just say spiritual gifts are grounded in a relationship. One where you get to know the person, God. And it's not you forcing a change. To be slightly critical, there are a couple branches of Christianity, usually they go by the name it and claim it idea, where the lines for spiritual gifts and magic become blurred. The idea being, if I say the right words or the right prayer, God must do what I want him to, because I've done the right formula. And that's not true.
Yeah.
And so to be able to divide that distinction for a witch can be quite helpful in helping them understand.
Yeah, because because they are healing in like witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
They are like magical healing.
Yeah.
Let's say like almost exact as miracles and all that stuff. So when people ask me, basically, it's the spell they cast. Also, what they got is power, but you got your healing. So what's the what makes me wanted to go to you instead? I can just use this.
Yeah, and not the logic would be, I have my magic and I can do better what you do, and that is a hard thing to address, because usually that'll come to someone becomes so addicted to magic to get through life they're not willing to let that go, and usually it's not the best way to address that is not to focus on you have to give up your magic, but to talk instead about, well, what are some of the drawbacks? Like those lists I talked about. Thinking that you can manipulate the whole world and yourself. Does that talk about the pride issue? And ask, well, has there ever been a magical spell you've done where something has gone wrong, something bad has happened, there's been some kind of issue? And most witches will say, yeah, there was. And then you can focus in on that. Well, let's talk about the spiritual gifts that come from a good and all-loving God. God is not going to put me in that particular position. I'm not going to get eaten by some astral wildlife. Also pray that, and this can be a scary prayer to pray, but pray that someone's illusions can be unmasked. I didn't read this quote, but it was from prayer. This is from one person where someone was praying for them to have their illusions dispelled. This person said, one night while I was doing this astral travel spell, my spirit felt like it was roaming through regions of heavenly light, and like usual, I was surrounded by this overwhelming luminosity, waves of bliss radiated through my spirit. Suddenly, another force stepped in. It took me completely by surprise. It was like a supernatural hand had taken me behind the scenes of this experience, and I saw the face of devouring darkness. Behind what was my usual experience of beauty lay a massively powerful, wildly churning face of hatred and unspeakable abomination. The face of demons filled with the power of Satan. This, basically, he said, it scared the beep out of me, and it was the experience that eventually led me to Jesus. Sometimes, pray that what they see as their positive experiences, they'll see the truth in. It can be kind of scary because it might freak them out, but that could be another approach.
One question I have is, if you're talking to a person who is a convicted
to himself witch, and he is going towards the border of suicide.
And going towards what?
Towards the border of suicide, like contemplating it seriously. What would be a good approach?
That was basically a vast majority of the posts of people. Like, you want to repeat the question? It's like, how do you approach someone who is a witch but leaning towards suicide? And that was a vast majority of those posts on the website of people seeking for help because they felt so powerless because of the different things happening to them. Or it may not even be that. It may be the very personal pains that brought them to witchcraft are not being adequately addressed, and they're depressed and still leading towards suicide. In that, if it's the magic stuff, ask them to just take some little steps with you in Christianity and see what happens. It's like, hold on a little longer. Take some steps with me. What do you have to lose at this point? And that's often where a lot of people would come to me if I was in the drug program. What do you have to lose already? You're already at the brink of hopelessness. So do that. If it's just because of their personal pain, treat it like any other suicide. And some of these things, don't think you have to do this on your own or yourself. I've made the mistake sometimes, especially when I was in college. Someone comes to me with these problems and I think, through God, I'm going to help. No. I had an abuse victim where I should have just referred immediately to professional help. She had a flashback in the middle of her Bible study and pulled the hand right off the chair that she was sitting in. And that said, I really do need professional assistance. And so get some professional help involved, walk with the person, treat it like any other person who has the suicidal thoughts. And, like I said, ask if they have a plan, that kind of thing.
Alan, have you come across any explanation for why so many members of this community are white and middle class? I was really surprised to hear that. Maybe nobody's looked at that, but
I don't think it's something that's really been addressed. I think it's because it appeals specifically to a lot of white middle class concerns. A lot of minorities are worried about food, violence, given their particular demographic, and that's not. If you're living in inner city Oakland, this whole idea of going out in the woods and praying in a circle is just not in your cultural radar screen. But for a white middle class person that's feeling disconnected and wants to reconnect with the environment, so it has some appeal. I mean, this is no real hard fast answer. It could be a really good study.
Yeah, what about in other countries? I was just thinking of comment about people in other countries and nations who have a form of this. That's a whole other.
Yeah, this is primarily the paganism, capital P, you find in Berkeley,
right,
in the United States, and Europe. If you're a third world witchcraft, it's probably because you're involved in the witchcraft that comes from your particular religion. This would be an example, one of the witch stories. I like to talk about the witches that were killed in Salem. Remember those poor witches that were killed in Salem? The people who were killed in Salem were primarily Christians who were victims of mass hysteria. And there was one, I think it was Margot Adler, she was just honest in saying, I think there was only one witch at the Salem trials. Her name was Tabuta. She was a slave from the West Indies. She was probably a witch, and those trials never affected her at all. So this isn't the third world type of witchcraft.
Right.
These are the people, but this is the people you'll primarily find here in Berkeley. If you go to Africa, this is a different deal.
Right.
In that case, adopt the missionary approach to whatever particular native religion that you're going to and encountering.
This is probably similar to like some of the stuff that you mentioned, but what about the cases of those people who like pride themselves on serving the darkness rather than like so?
Now see, there was a long list of different denominations. Well, they call them traditions and paths. I just say denominations, though Christians understand it. There's a long list, and a lot of them really just value these things and they're practicing white witchcraft. There are those that wholeheartedly embrace what they call the left-hand path. The right-hand path, white magic, according to them. Left-hand path, black, dark magic. I'd use an example, someone that follows, say, the Discordia tradition, or the Chaos tradition. A lot of times the Egyptian tradition will have more, they just wholeheartedly embrace the darkness, and that's usually primarily for self-serving motives. In that case, again, a lot more prayer, and especially if they're willingly walking into some of the more destructive stuff, talk to them about the dangers, the scary stuff that's happened. One thing, Norse. That's what I found, that Norse witchcraft or Norse Wicca, that I found is very common among the white supremacists in prison. And not very common elsewhere. And so if someone talks about they're involved in Norse witchcraft, you might have a lot more baggage that goes with it. Meaning some type of past criminal activity and involvement in white supremacy stuff. Also the Norse brand, it's also part of the reason too, the Norse brand of witchcraft was kind of what Hitler was working into things as well. So it has an appeal to white supremacists. So not all, again, like I say, you have to get to know each individual one, but there are some witches that just wholeheartedly go into the dark side. I mean, I would say it all has the aspect of the dark side, but stuff that's a lot more dangerous.
Can you describe what's deliverance?
Deliverance?
Yeah.
Basically, I don't think this is a particular venue to go on about everything that's involved in deliverance ministry. There's not really time for that, but basically deliverance is helping someone be free of demonic spiritual forces, one or more. And usually the best thing to do is point them to Christ, get them to accept Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And a good metaphor that I like to use is, if you've got rats, a rat problem in your house, the best way to get rid of the rats is you clean out the trash, and the rats go. Bring in Jesus to clean out the trash, and oftentimes you don't really have to address each individual rat. Just accept Christ and the Holy Spirit. Lots of prayer. There's the verse that says this kind only comes out with prayer and fasting. And often the way I look at that verse is it really has to do with your relationship with God. Because really, if you say, oh, here's someone that's possessed with some really big, nasty issue, and this one doesn't come out with much prayer, except for much prayer and fasting, so you just stay right here. I'm going to go pray and fast for several weeks, and I'm going to come back. And they're not going to be there. I think the prayer and fasting is what has to be happening before you ever even see this person. It has to do with your walk. But I just say, point the person to Jesus, get them to accept Christ, and that can provide deliverance. For more detail, basically I think the whole idea of exorcism type stuff is a lot of needless hogwash.
I'm not talking about that hardcore
The stuff you see in movies.
Just saying.
Because, I mean, you just introduce the Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit causes the spirits to flee. You don't have to be throwing holy water at them. The power of Christ compels you. Oh no, it's pea soup. No, that's all Hollywood. Does that help?
Yeah.
Well, any further questions? We'll probably wrap it up here. And feel free. Oh, Paul. Oh, okay. You were just. Oh, wow. Okay. If you have any other questions, feel free to see me at some point in time. I'm around. I'm here in church. And this presentation turned out to be long, so thank you.